So it's great to be actually able to stand here today and say we have now published a clean air strategy. I know I've stood here before and said one was coming, so now we have actually got one for everybody to work towards. So I'm not going to labour the point on the health impacts. I think it's been suitably covered this morning. I suppose we've talked about the health impacts, and just to mention also the environmental impacts in terms of crop yields, water systems, our species diversity, which was partially discussed, buildings and materials, our forests, and in terms of actual odour as well. And there's some key points. We talk about the premature deaths, the 1410 and the 1300 specifically from particulate matter. But just to bring that into focus is to remember that these are similar rates to breast and prostate cancer death rates. It's twice the road deaths annually, and it comes at an estimated cost of 2 billion. That was 2015, so we can only imagine how much that has increased since. So I suppose, what is our clean air strategy? Well, it was published in April this year, and it really formalises our policy development process and establishes very clearly our governance structures. And really it's an attempt to encourage more transparency on who is responsible for action across government and different stakeholders as well. It outlines some of the key actions to be taken and provides a very clear pathway around our ambition around the new WHO and how we're going to achieve that future ambition. There's a focus on evidence-based approach, and that's why the research piece this morning is so important, because we need to know what we're dealing with so that we can adequately develop the proper policies and measures. And then also demonstrate our progress on implementation. That's a really key part as well. So our policy process, which we've been doing for quite a while anyway, but is formalised in the strategy, is really around the fact that as the Department of Environment and the Air Quality Unit, we don't have overall control over all the levers for action. So we have some, but we don't have all. So where we don't have a clear oversight role, it's how we work together. So each year, because we have annual reports for both ambient and emissions, we review the data, we establish the priorities and the responsibilities, and then we start liaising with relevant departments. We design the measures and actions, then we move into implementation, and then tracking implementation and monitoring impact. Now, obviously, some of these issues are not going to be solved in a year, so some of the actions carry over on a more longer cycle. So there are kind of 7 strategic frameworks in the strategy, and these are really the key parts that we feel are essential for delivery. And these are all broken down into different chapters. So from targeted policy measures, setting out our ambition and the strong governance required, the actual policy developments, the legislation, the enforcement, the monitoring, and then most importantly, as we've discussed, the communications. And then the things that we have control over and how we can work better with government departments and other stakeholders. So we talked a bit about ambition, and just to be very clear, the strategy does set out a very high level of ambition for ambient air quality improvements. So WHO interim target by 2026, the interim target 4 by 2030, and then full alignment by 2040. In terms of our national emissions, then, we will be looking to set new limits, and we're bearing in mind that there is probably going to be an EU process to look at that as well. But the overall goal is the achievement of continued reductions. There is no safe level of air pollution, so that's where we need to be moving, is continued reductions until we're as close to our clean air as possible. We also will continue to review the possible additional policies and measures that we need to put in place to make those achievements, but also mindful that there is, and it's been spoken about earlier, a linkage between what we're doing in clean air and the climate action plan actions as well. And it has been mentioned, there are significant challenges ahead. Based on the EPA report from this year, the 2022 air pollution levels shows that reaching targets for ambient air quality will be extremely challenging. While that report doesn't take into consideration fully the impacts of all the current policy measures on future air quality, it does set out how much of a piece of work we have to do, I suppose. And then in terms of our annual emissions or ceilings, they are mostly on track, but as it was mentioned, we have a problem in terms of agricultural emissions, which need increased focus. And given our achievements to date, additional ambition will be challenging. We have covered a lot of the pollutants and have made significant reductions, but we're down to some of the more trickier solutions now at this point, and that will be a challenge to deliver as well. So, in terms of achieving our ambition, one of the most important things, and we talked about it a little bit yesterday at the research forum and the NGO forum, is really around governance and collaboration. So, we need to make sure that there's proper oversight and that somebody is checking that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. So, every year we're going to do an annual Clean Air Progress Report, and that will be submitted to government to show what we have been working on over the past year. And it will also be brought to a cross government Clean Air Strategic Implementation Group for them to, I suppose, check, ask questions, make sure that it's fully being understood what we're doing, and that making sure that we're being held accountable. Each department will also report annually on their progress in reducing air pollution, and each department has different levels of agency or involvement in these. But another aspect of that report is really increasing awareness within the departments, whether they think they have a part to play in relation to air quality or not. Having to do that report really increase their awareness of the impact of their policies may have on air quality. It's also really important that we ensure that air quality is integrated into the development or review of national plans and policy documents. And then we really want to make sure we're having much better engagement with our key stakeholders. So it's set out in the strategy, but we do have a very clear governance structure. So that Clean Air Strategic Implementation Group, it's made up of senior staff from all government departments. And into that, DEC will be the secretariat, the air quality team. But that group is fed into by other groups working together on different elements. So we talked about the Clean Air Strategic Implementation Group on communication. And that's really important. So that deals with a lot of the main government departments who are taking action around different measures that have air quality impacts, and they're doing a lot of communication around those. And how do we work better to make sure there is that coherency of communication around these issues? We have a National Enforcement Steering Committee that we'll be establishing. We'll also be working with the NGOs in a lot more structured way, I suppose, and that's the Clean Air NGO Forum, and then the Clean Air Research Forum as well. Both those forums actually met for the first time yesterday. As I said, there'll be departmental reporting, and then the UTRAP group, which was established in 2019, which is the Urban Transport Related Air Pollution Group. And all these groups will feed back the work that they're doing back up into that Clean Air Strategic Implementation Group, so that we're getting a good sense of everything that's happening and making sure that everybody's working together on the same issues and problems. So in terms of policy development and targeted measures, for our national emissions, every 4 years we have to develop a National Air Pollution Control Programme, or NAPCP, and we're currently doing that at the moment. This is a very technical document. It complements the Clean Air Strategy, where it sets out a lot more detail on the actual actions and measures that we're taking to improve our air quality. At the moment, the measures that are included, they are anticipated to ensure that we reach most of our EU commitments, but there is work to do. But it does also recognise that overlap between climate action plans and actually quantifies the impact of the climate action measures on air quality. In terms of ambient air quality then, we've said this before about prioritising a focus on fuels and transport, and also linking in with their national emissions reduction. So what we are doing on the national emissions, how is that impacting on localised air pollution and air quality? We're also, as has been very well outlined today, improving our modelling capacity to help determine those impacts as well, and also how the climate action plan actions and other policies across government interlink, and how they impact on ambient air quality, which was something that we haven't up to now had great view of those impacts and how they, I suppose, will help us achieve our ambition. So I said flippantly last year, cars, fires and cows are our main problems. So I suppose they are key policy development areas. So cars, and we've spoken about this, the transport related pollution, the generation of NOx. So we work quite closely already with the Department of Transport, looking at measures on how we reduce transport related pollution, and also the urban transport related group works together with another group of key stakeholders in the transport sector. In terms of fires and the burning of solid fuel, I think it's been very clear this morning of the impact, the generation of particulate matter, sulphur and other pollutants. The regulations and primary responsibility actually does sit with the air quality unit for that, so we're working quite hard on that area. But we also interlink with the energy unit within our own department and the Department of Housing in terms of building regulations and standards. And then finally, in terms of cows and agricultural practices, and it was a really interesting presentation this morning. So not just in the generation of ammonia, but creating that secondary particulate matter, which we are concerned about. We work very closely with the Department of Agriculture on that, but also there are interlinkages with the Department of Housing and their water policy in terms of nitrates. So I'm not going to go hugely into detail on this, but some of the key actions, I mean, we support the National Monitoring Programme and we're working with the team on the Life Emerald project. And what we want to do is start moving towards better indicators of progress and benchmarks of success, increasing that modelling capacity and setting new indicators so that we can monitor our progress and establish where priority action is required in the short, medium and long term. As I said, we're establishing that clean air research to make sure that we understand fully what the priority concerns should be, where the areas of interest or emerging pollutants are, and also the solutions, because we know that we don't have all the answers. And we will look to publish calls for evidence on specific air quality issues as we work through this process. In terms of communication, then we spoke a lot about that this morning and the importance of it. So as I said, we're establishing that clean air communication strategy group, and the first meeting was last week. So as part of that, we will develop a strategic communication plan so that we have a kind of coherent overall national plan for communication, but then how that works down to the national and into the local and engagement with NGOs and other key stakeholders. We also are looking to improve engagement with the Department of Health and the HSE, given the importance of this on health, and looking to support more citizen science. It was flagged this morning how important that is in terms of agency and communication and awareness raising. So we want to do more and more work with key stakeholders to increase that citizen engagement piece and better expand the public engagement into the policy process. It was the Clean Air for Blue Skies was mentioned today, and many thanks to our colleagues in Cork City who ran, I suppose, the first bigger event that we've ever done in terms of Clean Air for Blue Skies, and we'll use that as a template about how we can further expand that across the country. And also we spoke about that Clean Air Forum and that coherency of message as well. And then in terms of regulation enforcement, as the Minister mentioned, we are making changes to primary legislation, which is currently the Air Pollution Act, and we're reviewing all our air quality legislation at the moment to strengthen those enforcement provisions and give the local authorities the tools that they need for further engagement and compliance around the solid fuel regulations, but also as we move towards the WHO, there may be other areas that we need to look towards. So that implementation of the new solid fuel regulations is really important, and we're looking to establish that enforcement structure to make sure that there is that coordination and engagement and support for the local authority sector. And then working to strengthen the multi-agency enforcement as well, because we're not the only sector that are looking at some of these issues too. So in terms of our progress to date, I suppose we've established all our working groups quite recently, but a lot of progress was made. It was a very useful session last week and yesterday as well. Our air quality legislation review is almost completed, and the review of the Air Pollution Act is complete. The pathways forward will be set out early next year and brought to the Minister. And we're working on an issues paper, so to work on some of those trickier problems that we're facing, to both engage with the public through consultation and the different forums that we're establishing to make sure that we're fully understanding the problem and have some ideas about how to move it forward. As the Minister said, we have a business case development for the enforcement structures, and we hope that that will progress quite significantly next year. And then that second National Air Pollution Control Programme, which is due next year, the first draft is almost complete and it will go out for public consultation very shortly. So that was my whirlwind tour. I'm happy to take questions afterwards. So you can visit the full strategy. I'm sure the link will be available later. And at any stage, we have an open door policy. So if there's any questions, please contact us, airquality@dec.gov.ie. So thank you very much.